religious leaders in the temple. We're not going to read this, but I'll tell you, you guys have heard the story of Jesus overturning the tables and driving out the money changers and all of that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I realized that he did that twice. He didn't just do it once. He did it twice. And in John chapter 2, very early on in Jesus' ministry, in fact, it's right after his baptism temptation experience, and they go to Jerusalem, and right after he's calling his disciples, they go to Jerusalem, and he enters into the temple, and he sees what is going on there. And essentially, if I could help you understand a little bit of what was going on in that, imagine for a second if you showed up and you pulled in our parking lot. We had a guy, a valet, standing there with a little money bucket, and he says, "Hey, we're glad you're here at church this morning. Parking spots are $5. We go, "Okay. What if I don't want to pay $5? Well, I mean, there's plenty of other free parking spaces down the road or whatever. But you're more than welcome to go get one of those spots, and then you can trudge your way over to here and get yourself in there." And you go, "Okay, well, I'd much rather just like park here and walk in. That'd be nice. Okay, here's $5." And so you get there, and then you walk inside, and you got your kids with you, and somebody says, "Hey, great, so glad your kids that are here. Hey, children's church is going to be $10 this morning, so you need to that's going to be there for that." And you go, "Man, I don't know if they're going to get $10 worth out of it, so maybe I'm just going to make them sit with me." And then so you come into the church service here and you sit down, and sitting down in every one of the chairs, there's a headphone set that's sitting there, and then a little change jar that's right next to it. And you're going, "What is this?" And then all of a sudden the church service starts, and everybody's up here on the stage, and they're singing into their microphones, but you can't hear anything. And you're like, "What's the deal?" So they're just everybody's air guitar and and you're going, "What in the world is the deal?" And you ask somebody, and they say, to listen to the service, you got to put some money into the thing, and then the headphones work. You put the headphones on, then you can hear what they're doing, and you can experience it, and all of this kind of stuff. And you're going, "Man, I mean, what's the deal?" And so there's this hoopla that's going on, and you say, "Man, I just wanted to be here to worship and to meet God and interact with Him, get right with it. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm wanting." And there's all this other stuff that you're trying to make me do in the process to be able to be here and experience this, and what that looks like. I don't understand. It just doesn't make sense to me. This is exactly what it was like when Jesus showed up at the temple. What had essentially happened is, previously, in the past several hundred years, Jews had been scattered throughout the entire world. And so there were practicing Jewish people that were coming to Jerusalem because they were good Jews for Passover to celebrate there and remember what God had done for them. And they're traveling hundreds of miles to come to this place to come to worship. Now you think about it, there's no cars, no trucks, you're riding donkeys and camels. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to bring whatever you're going to offer, whether it's a goat or a sheep or a cow or a dove or whatever, to all this long ways over to where this place of worship is. So there were marketeers that had basically figured out, "Hey man, we can make a profit at this kind of religious thing. We'll just get a bunch of sheep, and the going rate for sheep, in town is like $25. We'll have them in here for 20, man." And then, shoot, who's not going to want to get in on that deal, right? Because we got to have this thing that's there. Then also, likewise, they had we talk about tithing being not under compulsion, and we hammer that. If you feel like you're being compelled to be generous and give in that capacity, don't give. Don't. Absolutely don't. The cheerful giver nature of it is saying, "Listen, this is an act of worship that's there." When the Jewish temple, they had established what they called a temple tax. It was a mandatory, you don't get to worship God without paying this. And the interesting thing was, they had their own currency. So I'm traveling from another country, I've got my money, which is, I can use anywhere else except the temple. So I have to go to a money changer, and they're going to make a profit off of me as we exchange dollars or whatever currency I have into their temple tax so that I can then enter into the place of worship. But not only Jews were in this situation, but it was also Gentiles, people that weren't Jews, but had fallen in love with this God that they had been introduced to. And they wanted him, and they wanted to be in right relationship with him, and they wanted to worship him. And there was all of this stuff that was hindering them from coming into the place of worship of God. And Jesus comes into the temple at the very beginning of his ministry, and he sees what's going on, and he flips out. He throws over tables, he drives out the animals out of town, and he says, "You shall not make this house a house of business." And it says that, the temple leaders, who were basically the religious leaders of this, of this mass, the church, the place to be, they came to him and they said, what authority do you do this with? Because they were getting their cut of the deal. He says, what authority do you do with all of this? And Jesus' answer was, or they said, what sign can you do for us to prove that you have the authority to say and do this stuff? They knew they were wrong. But they wanted a sign. They wanted Jesus to prove it. And this is what Jesus said. He said, tear this temple down, and in 3 days I'll rebuild it. That's a pretty impressive thing. And that was almost the equivalent of saying, tear down most of downtown Lafayette and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. And that's a pretty impressive statement. And they're going, that's nuts, you're crazy or whatever. It's interesting to note, if you read the end of Jesus' life, when Jesus is brought before the Sanhedrin and brought before the Jewish and religious leaders at that time, and they were bringing false accusations against him. They brought one genuine accusation against him, and it was this: we heard him say that tear down this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. That was 3 years later, and they still remembered it. That was a major thing that he said. He got angry at the situation of what was going on as he saw these people who were desperately trying to get to God being exploited and held far off from God. He got mad about it, and he acted. Second time that we see Jesus get angry is what we just read in Mark chapter 3. We see Jesus getting angry at religious leaders in the synagogue because they don't have any compassion for this guy. They're not doing anything. They really don't care about the fact that this guy is in trouble and that he's in need. Jesus showed this a number of times in his life when he would get fussed at for hanging out with sinners and tax collectors and dirty, rotten scoundrels, not the clean, well-dressed, church-type people. And these Pharisees would look at him and they said, what are you doing hanging out with these sinners? And Jesus' response was, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, it's the sick. I didn't come for the righteous, but for the unrighteous. He loved those people. And he saw this man, and these people had no compassion. And I get this. I mean, can you imagine sitting in that room? I mean, it'd be like meeting in our cafe, and there's like 15 of us there. Jesus says this, and then he looks every one of the men in the eyes, and not one of them says or does anything. And the fire goes on in Jesus' eyes, and his heart breaks as he realizes what's going on. He says, if nobody else will do something about it, I will reach out your hand. The man's hand is restored. Third time we see Jesus get angry is at his disciples. Jesus gets mad at his disciples. I thought that was kind of fun. Mark chapter 10, the story 13 through 16, is the story where there are women, wives, that are bringing their children to see Jesus. And the disciples are like, no, our teacher is, he's too busy to deal with these scrawny little ones. Shoo, be off. And it says that Jesus turned and was ticked at them. I don't know if that's exactly the root of it, but it says that he was, I think that the proper word is he was indignant. Modern day translation, he was PO'd. He's looking at his disciples and he says, do not hinder the little children from coming to me. Because the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. And you want to see the compassion of Jesus? Jesus gave value to children in a day when children were nothing, really. We think we live in a society that devalues human life and